All right. Good morning, everybody, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Excited to be hosting this panel on development and packaging for Filmocracy, and to be kicking off the festival this way with a lot of my good friends, who I will introduce in 1 minute. Cool. Now that everybody's here, just a little bit of how this is going to go. We'll do introductions, and then we'll jump into a fireside chat, and then for the last 10 to 15 minutes, we'll be doing Q&A. So just anybody in the audience that wants to ask questions of the panelists, there's a Q&A chat box over to the right, which we'll be monitoring and pick up questions from there. If that makes sense, clap your hands if you're in the audience so I can hear you. I'm just kidding. With this technology, we can't hear the audience, which is good. No hecklers. Okay, cool. So I'll start by introducing everybody very briefly. Going off the screen, we've got Bobby Hoppey, who is an independent producer. He has worked on films such as Pig and Barney the Dinosaur. John Hilary Shepherd, who is also an independent producer, who worked on films as Rocket Man and Black Swan. Viviana Zarragoitia, who is the VP of 3 Point Capital, who most recently worked on Uncle Frank, Bruise, Pieces of a Woman, and of course, Tiffany Boyle, who is president of packaging and sales, and recently she worked on Something Else and Arkansas, in addition to a bunch of movies that came out this year as well. So thanks you all for being here with me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody.
I'd love to kick off just by asking just a very, very broad question, which is, how did you get into your part of the industry? And try and keep it to a very small, not a very small, but don't go over 5 minutes. And kind of why is where you are the thing for you? Viv, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So my first job in entertainment was working as a production accountant for a production company called New Image, which is still around. They're quite well known. I sort of had kind of a roundabout way. I kind of knew what the end goal was, which is I wanted to be a producer, kind of a financial producer, exec producer, if you say. So since there isn't really a path, I just started where I could. And I got that job as an accountant from a boss I had at my college job who worked in entertainment. So, I was just eager to learn and kind of just start working and get my hands dirty and just meet people because it's such a relationship business. And then from there, I did a few other stints at other production companies. I've done coverage, I've read scripts, I did development. Then I did finance at Lionsgate for a few years. So when you're starting out, I was so excited to just be working in the industry that I'm like, I'll just do whatever. But ultimately, after a few jobs, I kind of figured out, where use my gifts to best move myself forward. And that was really in the accounting finance field. But again, it's kind of like I had the end goal and I just found a way in there. So accounting was really a stepping stone to finance, which is what I do now.
And I still feel like that energy of I don't feel like you've ever lost that energy, or I can't imagine how insane that energy was when you got started.
Yeah, it was way more when I was 18 as opposed to now I'm 34. I'm like, okay, it's still there, but But yeah, I just like learning all aspects of the business. I would love to do everyone's job at some point, even though I don't have enough years in my life to do that. But
well, we'll see. You never know with technology.
That's true.
If anybody's going to keep going, I believe it's you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think what's interesting about this panel is you guys all have completely different backgrounds and completely different experience and parts of development and packaging right now. And I think it'll be illuminating once we kind of get into the material to talk about those different pieces and how they work together and how you guys individually see those pieces where other people might not see those pieces. Because I think silo is a big word in the industry for me. And I think that's something we'll try and break today. Tiff, do you want to go next?
Sure, yeah. So I graduated from the film program of Loyola Marymount. I went to the same school as Viviana, actually. And I started at a foreign sales company that also produced, and I started in their production development arm there. My boss ended up shooting a movie in South Africa. They didn't know what to do with me. So I ended up working on the foreign sales side and learning a lot more about the business side of filmmaking and how to recoup and get your movies made financially. I was there for a couple of years, and then I got the opportunity at Ramo Law. We rep primarily producers, financiers, and then a handful of writers and directors in film and television. So I've been there for 11 plus years. I started there when it was just 4 of us, and now there's about 30, and enjoying seeing the progress.
Yeah, the expansion that you guys have. Also, just the team is great over there. Everybody on the team is great, except for Stu. I hate that guy. No, he's a good dude. I'm just kidding. Okay, Shep, should we take you next?
So I came out here this millennium to go to AFI in screenwriting, and I'm a big proponent of students interning, and my first job came through the internship that I here at AFI, which was, I heard that the Mount, who had done one of my favorite movies, Bull Durham, and was from North Carolina, where I'm from, had this internship, and it was really great because it was just 1 day a week that all the interns came, and Tom did like this 3 or 4 hour mock. Well, it wasn't even really mock. It was his big development meeting of the week, where we would have read one of his projects and discuss it, and then we would have read, 2 or 3 submission scripts as well. And there were a couple of projects that Tom had that he had us do, which is typical for an internship, like writer lists and director lists. And for whatever reason, he loved my lists. And I actually there was a project he had at Paramount that was kind of a Pretty Woman romantic comedy called Personal Shopper. And I pitched the writer Malia Scotchmarp, or 2 different writers. One was Audrey Wells, because I had just seen her movie The Truth About Cats and Dogs in a test screening, because I also worked for the test screening company, NRG. And I said, hey, I just saw this great movie. It's not out yet. It's her first movie, that she's gotten produced. And he said one of her movies went down, actually hired to work a project. In that internship, say, you'd be really good at development. And I had gone to AFI for screenwriting, and so I was write and still write as well. So then Tom signed a deal with Aaron Spelling's company, because at the time they had a small foreign sales office, Spelling Films, and they produced movies like In and Out and The Usual Suspects and Breakdown with Kurt Russell, and a lot of really great movies. And he got me that job when he signed Spelling Films. That was my first job in development. And I've worked for various different production companies, and then a couple of big financiers over the last few years. And now I have my own company producing. So it was through an internship was my way in.
Good. I guess that's the in part of internship, or some other etymology, but I'm not sure. Okay, Bobby, do you want to jump on?
Yes, sir. So I've been, in terms of entering the industry, I've been out here plugging away for about a decade. I did not go to film school. I was sort of a lifelong cinephile. I went to school for journalism and business, and then put it together in my early 20s that I wanted to pursue this instead while I could. So my access point out here, I started in talent, which I'm actually very, because everything, I'm sure we'll talk a bunch about packaging and that whole process, but everything sort of comes back to the talent. And so I think even starting out as an assistant, we were just liaising with everybody, the producers, the casting directors, the lawyers, the family members in certain cases. Just it was a wide sort of breadth of all the people you interact with, literally just about everybody involved in making a film. So I enjoyed that foray into talent, and then I ended up transitioning more to the production, development, finance side of things. I worked at a company called Echo Lake Entertainment for about 5 years, which had a long-standing film fund. And that was truly like my grad school in terms of figuring out how you cobble together financing for a film, what foreign sales looks like, all the kind of boring but essential realities of getting independent film made. And I ended up overseeing the development slate there for a couple years. My next post after that was I helped to start a new company called Valparaiso Pictures, which had a big emphasis on development finance, which is incredibly rare out here. Definitely a shortage of that. So that was a point of differentiation. And while I was there, we got involved in all kinds of projects, including Barney the Dinosaur, which Jasper mentioned at the top of the call. And sort of the two key projects I was involved with there was this film called Straight Up, which is an LGBTQ rom-com, which is now on Netflix, that I'm really proud of. And this film that will come out next year called Pig, which stars Nicolas Cage, and Neon is going to release that one. It's wild. I'm now independently producing on my own, which has been a fun adventure in this crazy year. Working with several people on this call, in fact, on different things, and a big emphasis on packaging. I'm packaging about 6 things right now, and everything is sort of its own case study. And then just finally, I've also been involved in consulting in this moment that I'm in now. I'm consulting with 2 companies, one of whom I work with Shep on, this company called Everlast Pictures, as well as a new company called Complementary Colors. And that's fun to sort of be a part of introducing a new production company financier to the space and sort of helping find strategic inroads for them. So my days are a mix of a lot of things, but I'm keeping busy and staying afloat, which is the 2020 goal.
Yeah, I feel like mix of things is a gentle way of putting how I'm sure everybody on this call's days go. Okay, now we're going to get into the very, very tricky part of this call. And it's called defining something, right? So packaging is one of those terms that means a lot of things and sometimes is used to mean nothing. So I'd love it if you guys, and this is kind of like just more of this will be popcorny for a minute in terms of like anybody can jump in and answer this question and anybody can add their additional perspective because you guys all have different perspectives on what packaging is. Who wants to go and jump into the deep end?
Yes, I will. In particular, I tend to focus on what I call business-oriented packaging, which means I really specialize in helping find producers, executive producers, co-fi partners, as well as sales agents and distributors. So I'm not the one who tends to focus on getting the talent for the most part. That's really my silo. And I know a lot of other people have a lot more connections with talent or management companies, agencies, things like that. So I don't know if where you guys feel like you land.
So let's unpack that a little bit. So there's a bunch of different types of titles that you listed off and stuff like that. I think what in a very easy to understand way is why that's important.
Well, you can't make a film without the money.
Good.
So I tend, like I said, focusing more on producers. I say producers are the backbone of a film or a project, and so finding that producer is really important. It's gonna help you push it through from beginning to like the 15 years later where they're having to track reporting coming in, and it's the bane of their existence. So there's that, and that's why that's important. The financing is also important, obviously, to make it. And then in terms of the sales agents and distributors, they're important from the standpoint of you have to have an end game for your content, be that if you're pre-selling or if it's already shot. and being able to distribute it around the world and get people recoup money so that you can go make your next movie. That I believe that's important.
Those
Did that
are
answer everything?
Yeah, I think those are all important reasons. What point do you feel like, because you were talking about how it's not so much the talent side of packaging, where in the process do you feel like, because I know you jump in at any point, but what's most comfortable for your part of the packaging? What's most helpful for people before they approach you and go like, hey, Tiffany, you say you work in financing. Here's my film. Finance it. It's just a pitch though. Like what?
Yeah.
Where?
I have taken things from just a script, but the easiest time to come in on a project is when you're at one of these kind of stages for me, which is you have maybe at least 30 to 50% of your financing attached, and it can't be like your tax incentive because that's a given, right? Like it's got to be some sort of like real partner, and or you have a piece of name talent already attached. That could be a director, an actor, maybe even a producer if they hold that kind of weight. And all of those pieces have to justify the budget you're making. I had a first-time director call me yesterday saying he wanted to make a $6 million movie, and I was kind of like, no. So it's really making sure that when you're approaching people for financing, you're approaching them at the right time with the right layers built in already to make it an even better way to push it forward.
I think dovetailing off of what Tiffany is saying for financing is different financiers are approached at different times. So for instance, if you are looking for development funds, that's obviously one of the earlier financings that you get to sort of develop a script or whatever it might be you use those funds for. And then I would say that equity, it might be the financing that Tiffany's talking about, sort of attaching it early. Because I'm primarily a lender and I don't really come on board till I would say all those other steps and the development side is kind of done, where the last money that's really needed is either a loan on a tax credit or some pre-sales. So we can't really do anything till equity and cast and a director and other pieces are already there. So I think when approaching financiers, I think it's important to know A, what type of financier you're approaching, and then B, to come at them with what they are interested in specifically.
Totally. And just to unpack that a little bit, I think, again, people see like financier on a company and they're just like, oh my God, my project's getting made. Like, you know, by the way, I totally did like this sort of the journey and still hopefully do whenever I see a website that says financing. No, I'm just, but like, you know, you said equity, there's tax credits, there's incentives, there's all of this kind of different stuff in foreign sales. Like what are the main categories, if you could just break those down of the different types of financing a film should be looking at in the independent world?
Sure. I mean, there are some development funds, very, very little of them that I know of, but there are some that exist. There's equity, which is really people who are writing a check or investing fully in the vision of this film and are recouping from any revenues of that film. And then there's lenders who are people that are lending either on a tax credit or pre-sale, which are distribution agreements that are entered into before the film is even made, that they're then using that money towards the budget of the film. Or there's GAP, which again is in the form of a loan, which is lending on sales estimates. So I would say the lenders are sort of the last people in terms of financiers to come on board a project. I would say development first, then equity, and then lenders is really the order. Because for a lender, they need to see all the other financing adding up to the budget, less their loan that they're coming on board for. And the other pieces are sort of packaged together before a lender comes on, right? So for a tax credit, they have to have already decided where they want to shoot. And if there are pre-sales, then they have already done the legwork of getting a sales agent on board to start selling the film.
Good. Okay, cool. Well, then I think maybe we'll peel it back a little bit from the end of the pipeline to the beginning of the pipeline. Bobby, John, Shepard, would like to jump in?
I'll jump in. I was. It's interesting how I approach packaging now as sort of a producer versus how I did when I worked for financiers, which is kind of a different two-way street. Now, especially in this moment, so much of what I'm doing is trying to.
Sorry.
So much of what I'm doing is trying to get key talent on a project early to sort of justify financing. And I'm finding, maybe it's the moment we're in and sort of the changing tide and this crazy year, but I'm finding that talent is much more open to talent, and their representatives are much more open to reading now and sort of coming on to things speculatively if it's good quality material. It's all sort of matchmaking, right? It's finding that amazing director actor combination that can trigger financing, and also it's different pathways. There's kind of the streamer pathway, which is its own thing. There are stars at streamers that can't really justify a theatrical film, and vice versa. So it's always doing that calculus, and I sort of always have a plan of like, okay, if we go with streamers, this is one version, versus if we cobble it together independently, working with folks like who Tiffany represents, it's just a different approach, but you sort of have to plan for everything.
Totally. I think unpacking that a little bit, that's my keyword of the day, by the way. I think they call it a crutch.
Apropos for this panel, packing and unpacking.
Packing, unpacking. Oh, dude, Viv with the save right there. And also in keeping with like the past panels of like bad sports references, because if you guys all know that I certainly don't play sports. Bobby, but you were talking about kind of making it attractive to talent. What does that mean?
What is
like? Do you make your script go to the gym? Do you put makeup on it? Like, introduce it to a guru or something?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to truly unpack that. I would say that it's just how I'm wired and how I approach material. And maybe it's because of where I started in the business and just what I've seen be successful. But everything I approach is sort of, does the script have an amazing role that's going to attract a meaningful talent, whatever that means, whether it's a meaningful talent for Netflix, meaningful talent in the independent landscape, or just an undeniable talent everywhere. And so, yeah, I mean, oftentimes the actors want to feel safe with the director they're working with, and that's always chicken and egg. If you put a filmmaker on before the actor, vice versa, is the actor producerial? Do they have their own company, or do they have a deal? Are they incentivized? It's just truly a case by case. But I mean, so much of what I'm sure all of us on this panel do is kind of make lists for these different scenarios. But no, just in terms of material, that's I need to see amazing roles, or something that's undeniably like a director's piece, like a genre project that, say an emerging horror director is just gonna get a crush and make their own. But yeah, does that help? Was that confusing?
Totally.
Okay.
Totally. Chef, do you want to jump in here?
So where, well, for me, when talking about packaging and where you said, making something attractive to talent, can you hear me okay and everything? I know that my connection's not as okay.
No, you're good. You look beautiful. Very attractive.
So it is interesting, since, now being an independent producer, so there's 2 projects I'm working on with the writers. And had the same issue when I first read them. I thought they had a great hook, and I thought that they fit into identifiable, markets. One seems really streamer family friendly, and one is a contained horror thriller. Both of them I felt had issues, difficult to packaging it, talent attached, which was the family friendly thing had a lead role. There were 2 lead roles, really. One was about like a 12, 13-year-old girl, and one was a woman who technically is her grandmother, but is complicated. But anyway, so build up so that we can get, you know, an Amy Poehler, an Amy Schumer, any of the Amy's, right, attached. Because it was so focused on the 12 to 13-year-old girl, and that's just really, there are, you know, that many 12 or 13-year-old girls who are movie stars and can, you know, you could patch and you know, have a buyer be interested. And in really basically the same issue with the horror script, it was focused, it had a great actor bait role for an elderly actress, and there was this tiny little role of her granddaughter, you know, who was like a late teens, you know, early 20s, and I just suggested beefing up that role because it would just offer more you know, casting opportunities. So that's kind of one of the things in early development, you know, when these guys are working on a second draft of a script, you know, you as a creative, and I'm sure we've got a mix of, you know, people who are, you know, in the audience, but on the creative side, you know, you may not be thinking of the kind of the commercial side necessarily, or the how do I get this produced side, when writing that great role for the grandma. And it's like, oh yeah, well, casting wise, this might be a little difficult. So that's kind of our job as producers in a way, of helping guide the creative. And it's always a real balance between the commerce and the art, you know.
Totally. And I love what you're saying there in terms of, you know, pulling out these different roles and stuff like that. You know, because casting is such a hat trick. I think, you know, as everybody on this call and, you know, in this industry will admit, like, everything is a hat trick. It's kind of like, how do you get to point B? Well, you start at point K, and then you reroute to point Z, and then you go to A, and then you can maybe come to B. You know, and I think, you know, how do you get talent attached to your project? It's like, you know, I think that there's a couple schools of thought that are like, you know, get popped out there a lot. And as you guys know from being on previous panels, like, I'm not a huge fan of some of these schools, but it's like, if you've got a role that Nick Cage can shoot out in one day in Los Angeles, it doesn't matter what that role is, just offer it to him. It'll be, and say it's one day. And like, that's just not usually true. I mean, you know, these actors are human beings who have lived long careers if they're valuable. And, you know, the fact is they want to do something that's good, even if it's a small role. They don't want to be in something just, you know, because they're going to make foreign sales and then you're going to make money off of their name. You know, does anybody have any thoughts after kind of hearing everybody else? It's okay if no. Everybody answered perfectly.
I think for attaching,
well, you know, to that point you just brought up, there definitely are actors who will, you know, do something just for the money, but at the same time, I mean, as someone packaging something and putting something together, and depending on kind of what type of project it is, when the foreign sales, and you know, Viv and Tiffany can probably speak, you know, much more eloquently to this, but the attaching things for foreign sales is a much different world than attaching things for the studios or for Netflix or for, you know, and even those, you know, streamer lists and the TV lists are much different than, you know, the studio lists of who they, you know, what's going to blow their skirt up, you know.
I'd say one way we've had,
but there definitely are actors who'll go out there and do one day out.
Yeah, if you pay them enough
money.
Find the money.
I was just going to say, I think it depends, kind of like what John is saying, what type of project and whether that actor or actress is really going to drive revenues. Because I think as a producer, your ultimate goal should be to recoup your investors' money so you can have longevity and continue on to the next project. So if you're making an action movie, you get some action star for a day or two and that drives foreign sales, great. If it's some other type of genre film where that actor isn't or actress isn't really adding much value, I don't know that it makes sense. I think it should always just be reverse engineered to what is driving distribution, aka what's going to recoup the money from the investors.
Totally. And I feel like it's, you know, part of the siloed nature is that, you know, where you're talking about kind of like, let's reverse engineer everything. You know, I think, you know, Bobby, I mean, you've worked a lot in like the development side. Shep now left the table for whatever reason, so I can't pull him on as well. But, you know, when you are working on the development side specifically, are you reverse engineering things most of the time, or is this kind of a forward engineering, you know, thing? Or is it both? Is there a way to do both?
Yeah, I mean, it's always case by case. I think in every capacity, if I'm working for a financier, if I'm putting some together on my own with some trusted collaborators, my preference is to see something like a script that is like naked and unencumbered. It stresses me out when like there's pre-existing attachments, because often, I mean, sad to say, oftentimes it's just they're not helpful attachments. And so I'd rather kind of approach something, fall in love with something creatively, see the commerce side, you know, everything in all of our capacities. We have to justify everything we're working on and spending time on. So you have to see, you have to have a plan. But so I guess that's forward engineering. I start with the material, and then I make my lists, and I see who's viable, but also who excites me creatively. And then it's just that very elaborate dance, going to the agency system, seeing who they have, who's available, who's reading, who's not, and just having a lot of conversations concurrently with all different kind of pieces of the puzzle.
Well, I think that, you know, it is what Viv's talking about as well, because you, by nature of being in the, you know, in the industry for so long, like have that what's valuable, right? I think that's more my question, is like understanding what's valuable versus what's not valuable, you know, or for a distributor and eventually for an audience, right? You know, I think I'd love to unpack, what does viable mean? What does a meaningful attachment mean versus an attachment? Viv kind of hit on it a little bit, but Bobby, do you want to keep going on your thread there?
Yeah. Well, I think it's sort of what the end goal is. So like there's one project I have that's I won't pitch the project to everyone, but it's very anchored in like a mother-son story. That's the whole thing. And we have this actress who's well known. She's not like Angelina Jolie, but she's a well-known face and beloved, critically acclaimed actress. Our goal for this specific project is a streamer. I think it's gonna be very hard to do it independently. I will try if I have to. But so recently we started talking to a star of a very breakout popular Netflix series to play the son. At old jobs that I had where I was thinking completely theatrically, this actor might not have been on those lists, but because he's meaningful at the streamers, it could be a game changer for our project. So we've now attached him, and we're sort of putting all our eggs in this basket for now. And if we can't get it done to the streamers, you know, he's wonderful, and we'll keep him on, and we'll see what we can accomplish. But it's sort of like, that's not my strategy for my 5 other projects. So it's like you just have to look at what's in front of you and what's the best path to the finish line, you know. And I think this guy being a Netflix star is undeniably meaningful when we go in January and pitch Netflix. So
any other touch points on what's viable and meaningful? Not from you, Bobby. You've talked too much already.
You know, there's a phrase that we often hear, which is people saying, you know, what's going to move the needle? And that's basically, you know, I mean, what we mean by a viable attachment, you know, if, and kind of what I think is important, you know, for independent producers, writers, and directors is to, look, I mean, I'm obsessed with this business. In high school, made in North Carolina, small town North Carolina, and get weekly Variety so that I could, you know, read the box office grosses in the early 80s. That's how old I am. But so I've always been kind of obsessed with just, you know, taking in, you know, information about the industry, and I think that's a really important. It's something I stress with all of, you know, my interns, you know, that I've worked with, and my creative execs and everything, is that you really have to be up on this industry. who are new hot director. That's why we all attend, film festivals and, are, like Bobby says, constantly tracking the agencies, just to see who's out there, who's working, and who needs work. But also it's important to know kind of, that having, that actor who won an Oscar 20 years ago but hasn't really worked lately isn't really viable or meaningful to the project now. I mean, I a relatively large financier, the number of producers who really should know better and attach meaningless directors or meaningless talent to their projects, that then we have to go, yeah, we're just not going to do it with that person. It doesn't make sense. So I think that the educating oneself, constantly really is.
All right. I love that answer. So I've got a tricky question as well, but I think is one that's appropriate for the audience, and then also for, like, I don't know, just everybody in this industry, like starting out or whatever, is it hurts when we say meaningless. Like, I don't think anybody says it's meaningless. I think they say meaningful, right? But like the opposite is of course something else, right? So how does one go from inviable or unviable to viable, and like break through towards this meaningful position, be it streamer or whatever? Is it about leveling up? Is there a certain tier program, right? Because I know there's a lot of, it's not unheard of that somebody has an amazing short that might go to all the festivals or something and be on somebody's radar, and that's viable for, say, an independent project of a lower budget or something like that. But is there some kind of thing that you guys have found that you've seen happen before of somebody breaking? I mean, I know you guys have,
Yeah, I
Somebody
saw.
breaking.
Yeah, becoming meaningful, or kind of like, how does one become a viable? And we don't have to, we don't have to wax too poetic on this one.
Right. I would say, I mean, some of the sort of really exciting case studies like this I've seen in the past have just been, a big factor of it has been right time, right place, but I think you can help create your own luck. I had, back when I was at Echo Lake Entertainment, we had very specific mandates for the kind of movies that we were looking for at that time. It might have changed now. I'm not speaking for them now. It was a lot of older audience demographic, people that were still theatrical, the silver dollar, they call it. So I would go to these sort of pitch festivals or things like this and interact with writers and emerging producers, filmmakers. And those that stood out to me were the ones that had done their research on what my company was, the kind of films we had produced, and really tailored. And it's a lot of work, right? And it's a lot of research, but they really tailored their pitches to what I needed. And there were cases where we took flyers on completely undiscovered writers and folks in that sort of arena because they had what I was looking for, and it was sort of a low cost of entry, and we got in business with them. I've seen on the, getting representation is not the end all be all. I think bad representation, or representation that's not a fit, or representation just to have it, is sort of worse than no representation, I think. But I've seen sort of in the querying process, I've seen someone send a blind email that was exactly what a certain manager was looking for at that certain point. And, it just wrapped as a Netflix movie a few years later. So it's, you just, I think it's a lot of, like Wishep was saying about, a lot of you might not be interfacing with the agents every day, and that's understandable, but it's kind of tracking. It's seeing what's out there, what's popping at different festivals, what the companies who make the kinds of films that you're inspired by are up to, and then kind of tailoring your, the marketing of your own projects with that in mind.
Yeah, I love that.
I have a really I feel interesting example of something being not viable / viable. I was at the financier Cross Creek, and we had only really done Black Swan. We got submitted a project that had Eli Roth attached as a producer. And the reason he had become attached to it as a producer was these two not so viable creatives, a director and a writer, Chris Ford and John Watts. They were part of a collective in New York, making a lot of shorts and music videos, and Chris was doing a lot of commercials, and they put together a mock trailer for a movie called Clown. That was about a clown wearing a guy wearing a haunted clown suit that gets stuck on him, and he has to eat 7 children in a week to get out of this haunted thing. And in that mock trailer, he had like a Lionsgate logo, and it was executive produced by Quentin Tarantino and directed by Eli Roth. And people thought it was a real trailer. Wow. And they got a call and here's part of my point. They got a call from Eli Roth, and they were like, "We're so sorry, we'll take your name off of it." And he goes, No. I love this idea. Do you guys have an actual story? Now they were fully prepped, and they were like, "Here's the script." Wow. Right? And they had not done anything yet. They weren't even, I don't even think they had feature reps. Here, I read it. He said, so then they went out to financiers, and it was too small of a movie for Cross Creek, but we found the money for them with a little startup financier. So, then that now it had a name producer, and, Chris was going to direct it, his feature debut, and now he's a huge director, did the Spider-Man movies, and John's a huge writer, or the other way around, sorry, Chris is the writer, John's the director. And and I will say that then this other financier, they cast a little-known Canadian actor in the main role, and we were, still kind of involved on an advisory level, and we really were kind of scratching our heads and said, well, okay, I guess if you guys want to go with this guy, but then that movie just got lost, then after it got picked up by the Weinstein Company, which had its own problems, and it really never got a release. Funny enough, then when Clown came out, someone from the Weinstein Company called and said, "Hey, how about we make Clown?" Or when it came out, they called up and said, "Hey, how about we make Clown 2?" And Brian says, "Well, you never released Clown 1, so." The point of it is, John and Chris really did all the right things to, in those early days of things going viral, by doing their prep and having their script, and we know how to do this for a low budget. We know exactly what we're doing and everything, and then I would say that had they had a meaningful piece of talent in that, lead role, then ultimately they did. I think, that movie may have had a little bit more of a shot at a wider, distribution and wider audience.
Tiff, Viv,
a little bit of a success story and a little bit of a not success.
I love that. I didn't know. I've never heard that story over all the drinks that we've shared. Tiff, Viv, do you guys want to comment on this?
In terms of like how you make yourself more viable?
I suppose, or kind of like a weird story that Shep shared. I liked that.
I mean, I guess one of the weird stories that we kind of got involved in is we tend to track, which I guess if you're a producer, I think this is a good thing. We tend to track up and coming talent coming out of like anybody who's recently won grants, or is named as like in the Sundance Lab and things like that. And one of the ones we tracked was, like 7 or 8 years ago. This woman got a grant for a Native American feature called "Songs My Brothers Taught Me." And the director was Chloe Zhao. And obviously now she's like out there doing Marvel movies and like gonna be doing some really amazing things. So, and that movie was a micro budget. So I think it's one of those things where, you know, you never know where you're going to find your next talent. And if you're a producer, that's really helpful to kind of go through those paths. And if you're a filmmaker or creator, it's, you know, going and looking at grants and things like that, people are tracking them that you don't even know.
Well, that's really good to know, because I think, you know, a lot of people out there, especially with the number of grants and festivals and everything, just go like, gosh, where is anybody looking and is anybody listening? So I think that that's a great story to bring up. Viv, do you want to comment on this?
I don't know that I can top that story. That's a really good one. So sometimes, you know, we have certain clients that start out making, you know, 500K films, and then you kind of grow with them little by little, and pretty soon they outgrow you. And it's like, but, you know, it's always, it's pretty cool to see, especially films that started out and were financed independently, let's say premiere at a festival and then get a big streamer sale. So, I mean, I would say that sometimes it feels like the media kind of portrays those as like the norm, but it's really not. Because if you think about all the films that premiere at a festival, maybe one or two get big sales, but, you know, there's hundreds that premiere. But I think it's really exciting, and I've seen that happen a few times at festivals and films we've worked on, that it's really exciting when they are appreciated and you kind of see the effect they have on the audience. So I think that's always a very special moment, and it makes this all worth doing in the end.
Totally. I love that. Yeah, and I think, you know, if I were to say something, you know, that kind of rounds out all of your guys' points, it's like, just keep going and be smart about it and study your craft and study the industry and know what works and stuff like that. I mean, these are all things that people can do and continue working on, you know, their personal voice so that they can be a breakout or something along those lines. That seems like it's a unifying factor in all of these stories. Well, I think we're getting near the end of our time here. So thank you guys so much for, you know, sharing all of your stories and sharing your morning with us. I deeply appreciate it, and wish I could take you guys all out to the green room.
11:30.
No, that was a typo. That was a typo. We're going to 11. Yeah. But I mean, Shep, you can stay until 11:30. Another panel begins with our friend Zach Book.
I was just looking at some of the questions in the Q&A to see if there's anything.
No, we'll go to the Q&A now, but I was just doing a small wrap up now. But okay, so let's go to the Q&A, and anybody from the audience can type Q&A, and then I'll say another goodbye and thank you to everybody as well. I guess I will pick them out, or you guys can flip over to the Q&A and say like, oh, this one's really interesting to talk about. Shep, you were already there. Did one peek out to you?
Azar asked, what kind of film should filmmakers stop?
I like that question too.
Yeah, bad ones.
So do we want to unpack a little bit of that about what is a film that, you know?
It's fine. You know, this business is so cyclical that definitely a conversation we had at New Republic was regarding zombie movies, and you know, it was really saturated, and you know, not only ones being made and released, and we had financed and released Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, and going into opening weekend that we would be #1, and we were tracking to do like 11 million, and we did 3 million. It was really like it was tracking company actually did a whole investigation into what went wrong, but well, you know, it was just a complete, you know, and anyway, you know, so that was something that we had definitely talked about. So it is writing that balance of what is trendy, what is viable, and then what's kind of saturated and on the way down. Because at the same time, we had conversations where we said, you know, but where's the next great vampire movie, you know? So so yeah, again, like I said, educating yourself and being on top of, you know, what those trends are is key.
I think it's interesting to talk about saturation there for a minute and trendy, because I feel like when you see saturation and trendy, it's like 5 years ago, those decisions were made to pick up that project at the box office. So it's kind of what's recently been picked up or something along those lines to maybe get a little bit more of an accurate barometer reading.
Yeah, don't watch the films that are coming out and saying, okay, this is what's popular. You got to look at what's being sold or picked up to say, okay, this is what people.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's doing your homework, things we've talked about. You know, read the scripts on the blacklist, track what's selling and being put into production. But I think at a certain point, it's also like, don't be so on the creative sort of macro side, don't be so fixated on kind of like emulating what's working. I think that you need to be mindful of that, but make your movie, because every script that's ever popped to me or every film that's ever popped to me is distinctive in some way. And I think if there's just like a copycat syndrome going on, it's really not gonna stand out.
Totally.
And that, you know, that's a great point of, you know, not looking at what's coming out, but looking at what's getting picked up and what IP is, you know. And again, that's why I'm like, you guys got to be on the, you know, the trades and reading all those articles. Yeah, and to that, like, if you see now something that's really kind of hit after the whole Big Little Lies and you know, that female and slightly genre kind of project, you know, the whole Gone Girl stuff, and you know, you back it up a few years even before that, something coming out, you know, based on a book called Dare Me by Megan Abbott, and that book came out right after Black Swan had been released. And you know, as a financier, we chased that book a little bit, interested in it, and that was 10 years ago, right? So, and it's only now just coming out as a TV thing. So yeah, it really, and that was really early into that whole female driven, you know, thriller kind of project. So you really kind of have to be that to, you know.
Viv, I saw you on mute. Did you have something to add?
Yeah, I liked Bobby's point about making just good content. I'm always a proponent that when everyone else is zigging, you should zag, because I think that's just going to make you stand out more, especially on the creative end. You know, there's one thing about following trends, but also just, I think content is key. And I think that if you have a good project and maybe it's hard to package or you're not getting talent to, you know, sign to it, or it's risky, I think high risk, high reward. And I know that's a difficult thing when you're trying to get equity lined up or sales agents to make pre-sales on something that maybe is out of the box. But I also think that people are starved for things that are different and new. And I think those are the type of projects that I personally like to watch, gravitate towards. So I think it kind of depends how you want to approach the industry, right? It's always like, do you want to make certain things to get to a certain level, which you can, and then maybe you get or, you know, if you just want to always just stick to your voice and your integrity, and if you're able to convince people and raise money that your script is really worth it, then I would say go for that. I think it's so hard to make films that it's not worth it unless you're 100% committed and passionate about it.
Totally. Yeah, I think that, you know, being on the rep side now, it's like, you know, my clients are always like, what should I be working on? And I'm like, my one piece of advice is probably nobody knows, right? Like, but you know, which is, what are you passionate about? Like, you know, like what are you going to get up every day and be glad to be working on, you know, knowing that it is, you know, hard and near impossible, but that it does happen. So I think that, you know, Viv, your point about keeping your voice and being honest to that and just honing that is well taken. I think we've got, if you guys have time, one more question. I know we said 10 to 11, so somebody's got a hard out. happy to jump off, or, you know, and thank you. But if there's another question,
Did everybody else just lose Jasper?
Oh crap!
I see him.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Tiff, can you hear me now? Can you hear me through Bobby's echo? Bobby, just repeat, I guess, everything that I'm saying to Tiff.
Echo.
Shep, can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, okay. Huh, weird. Viv, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, so strange.
Chat.
I feel like you're all channeling me to Tiffany then. Maybe one of you can repeat the question. I just, you know, and if any of you need to go, that's fine too. I think I like, just as quick ones, kind of, is it worth getting a YouTube influencer cast in my film? Do you guys want to tell Tiff that that's one of the questions?
The question is it worth getting a YouTube influencer in my film?
How do you guys address where that is? Is it dependent upon the material? Is it dependent upon
It's
the size?
It's probably dependent on the buyer you have in mind. I mean, there's certainly value to it if it feels authentic. You know, it's not the end all be all, but you know, Instagram followers and all that. I know it's a calculus that people make in terms of marketing indie films. So it's nothing that I have direct experience with yet, but I think it should be a consideration as long as creatively it makes any sense.
That works for me. And then I guess the other question.
We got a couple clients do influencer movies, and they really have to validate the sales. And most influencers aren't worldwide sales, so it can be harder. Which is why if you're going to do an influencer movie, knowing who your target buyers are, maybe it's a streamer. We had one client that did a documentary called Jawline that was in Sundance in 2019, I believe. And it was about influencers, and it sold to Hulu, right? Like that was the audience that Hulu needed at that time. So I'd say just do your research if you're going to do an influencer about like who your right buyers will be.
That makes sense. I think that's kind of backs on the Nicolas Cage's value question as well, is, you know, kind of like, how do you understand a piece of talent's value? You know, like, is that, again, looking in the trades and stuff? I don't think a lot of folks have relationships with foreign sales friends that they can ping, you know, but is approaching one of those companies and asking, you know, with an attachment appropriate, or kind of like, I guess, what's a lifeline to understanding somebody's value? You know, is it track record? Is it?
It ebbs and flows. Like I've had conversations. I had one crazy conversation a few years ago with a sales agent, a very reputable, smart. I'm sure they were telling me the truth as they that, you know, Kate Winslet didn't have any value anymore, and I was like, what is happening? It really depends on the size and scale of the film. I did a Nicolas Cage film last year. He absolutely has value. He has so much value. It's crazy. He got our movie financed, and it's gonna be really fun. But I think it's worldwide, and like comedy stars don't really travel worldwide as far. It's really yes, because there are people that are specialized in this. But it is kind of fluid, you know.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think, Tiff, can you hear me now? That's a big no. Well, then I'll do the wrap up, and you guys can just tell Tiffany that I say goodbye and send my love and appreciation. Thanks, everybody, for coming to see this panel, and thank you, panelists, for jumping on and being awesome. You know, love you all, and that's it. Can somebody repeat that for Tiffany?
Maybe if you put in the
Tiffany,
Send her a
Jasper
text.
saying bye-bye.
Well, the love and the appreciation was the main part.
Oh, and he appreciates them.
Okay, awesome. All right, guys. Well, everybody can log off now, and you guys, can come back and visit anytime.
Thanks, Jasper. Have a good
Thanks,
one.
Jasper.
Nice to see everybody.
Bye, guys. Thank you so much.